Hello, I'm Linley Gooden. Welcome to Money Live's live discussion, preparing for the great wealth transfer. Embracing a digital-first approach while retaining the essential human connection, hosted in association with Smart Communications and Salesforce. Great to have you with us today. Now, it's an exciting and dynamic time to be in the wealth, private banking, asset management and investment industries. Lots going on. Demographics are shifting, but there's challenge out there, obviously, in terms of the rising costs as well as ever increasing digital expectations to think about. So it's a time of transition. In fact, projections forecast that by 2030, more than 2/3 of wealth will be held by women, and the great wealth transfer continues to loom large as the next generation of investors nears retirement age. So how can wealth management firms effectively build services and capabilities that meet the changing needs of both existing and new clients, while also tackling those rising costs across the entire value chain? Well, one thing is clear: to navigate the challenges ahead, we'll all need to embrace technology being developed behind the scenes, and in an industry traditionally shaped by personal relationships, it's about combining a digital first approach with that all-important human connection that you know about only too well. Well, today we have a great panel to help us to move in the right direction. Let's meet them. First of all, Cara Williams. Cara, hello, how are you?
Hi, thanks very much. Doing well.
Great to have you with us. Please tell us who you are and what you do.
Hi, Cara Williams. I'm with Mercer, and I'm Global Head of ESG and Wealth Management.
Perfect. Great to have you with us today. Next up, we have Chris Loke. Chris, great to have you with us. Please introduce yourself for the audience.
Hi, great to be here. I'm Chris Loke. I'm the Chief Technology and Operations Officer at Seahor & Co. We're a 350-year-old private bank, the oldest in the UK. You can see the hallowed halls of the bank behind me.
Can indeed. I'm very intrigued by it. We'll talk about that maybe later on. John Williams. John, great to have you with us. How are you today?
Yeah, good. Thank you, Lindley. Morning, everybody. I head up the wealth planning function at NetBank Private Wealth. So we work closely with high net worth clients and their families to ensure they have a clear plan in place to help them achieve their lifestyle and financial goals.
Perfect. Great to have you with us today. And last but not least, we have Karen Oakland. Karen, lovely to have you with us. Please tell us who you are and what you do.
Thank you. As you mentioned, Karen Oakland, delighted to be here with you. Normally I'm based in the US, but today I'm in our offices in London. And my role at Smart Communications is head of marketing for the financial services industry. My favorite part of the job is speaking with customers, analysts, and other industry experts about how the industry is changing and evolving to meet client needs. So for Smart Communications, actually in particular, we've been focusing on wealth management as a market segment in financial services in part because of what we're seeing about this potential and accelerated interest in digital and where banks are investing in making operational changes, especially coming out of the pandemic, which I know we're going to talk about. So really excited to learn more from all of you in our conversation today.
Wonderful to have you all with us today. Now, you, wherever you are in the world, are our sixth panelists today. We want to hear your voice and your questions while we're live. Simply send any question that you may have at any point during the webinar using the question section right here on our webpage. We'll get to as many as we can towards the end of our discussion and put them to our panel. But let's get straight into it. Start by exploring the current status of the market. Just how much have things changed over the last couple of years, and what are the current challenges? Well, John, maybe you can kick us off first of all. How for you has the wealth and private banking space really changed over the last couple or 3 years?
Yeah, I think one of the very few positives to come out of the pandemic has been the introduction of remote working. So it's really how firms are managing a remote workforce. But I think more importantly, how we engage with our clients. I think the universal adoption of video technology has moved us forward leaps and bounds. I think also being able to introduce other family members, professional advisors into that conversation has really helped as well. And also amongst our elderly client base, again, we're seeing very good adoption of video technology, which clearly I think is here to stay.
Absolutely. Chris, what do you think? Where you are, how have things changed and what have been the biggest changes?
Yeah, I think the technological world was kind of ready for this hybrid that we've sort of thrown ourselves into, but pre-pandemic, no one was really up for the conversation, and we've accelerated from 0 to 100 overnight. And what we're now seeing is this shift from everything being remote to, well, what does hybrid really mean? Which things do people want to do remote? Which things do people want to do face to face? How does technology enhance the face to face experience? And I think we're at this kind of a really interesting point where society is really up for it, customers are up for it, regulatory wise we're able to do it, and the technology is ready, and we're seeing a rapid innovation in the way client needs are being transformed.
Yeah, absolutely. Cara, look, you have to go where customers are. If customers want to be online, then that's where you speak to customers, and that's very, very important. But, big changes for you, is it really about, we talk about digital transformation continuously. Is it about the infrastructure, the processes, or is it about this relationship and the way that's changed for you?
Yeah, I mean, over the last 10 years or so, people have been making massive investments in this space, but I don't think we were actually really thinking about the interaction with the client directly for the advisors or the bankers to be working with their clients. So it's really been very much focused on transaction, looking at your account, potentially making changes to your account or making payments, things like that. That's where the focus has been. But what we've really seen now is actually people don't have to come into the office to meet with their advisor or banker on a quarterly basis. So there, I think, pros and cons. One is that now I think clients realize they can actually speak to their advisor much more frequently, and digital has enabled that, and people are much more comfortable just getting onto a Zoom call. So there higher demand for time, face-to-face time, but virtual. But obviously the positive now is you don't have sort of that backlog of booking times for people to come into the office.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Karen, that's kind of the state of the union. That's what people here on our panel think today. What do you think in terms of how firms have managed to keep up and accelerate towards digital? How's that pace of change been?
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned, wealth has been a really interesting sector in particular. What I hear people saying is that wealth has lagged a little bit behind other areas in banking, in particular, because it had this legacy focus on high touch, white glove treatment, processes like onboarding and reporting, as Cara mentioned, even have been done in person. So first, it's been just embracing this idea that they need to shift to digital and recognizing where the future is going. And certainly some of that's even generational. Among high net worth clients are often older generations. They haven't been in the past particularly digitally savvy, but we've seen the pandemic really accelerate that shift. I was joking earlier, I taught my own 70-something parents to use mobile payments recently, and so we look at how quickly clients have had to embrace using digital to manage their money, and getting more comfortable with security. And so like an area that I kind of think is interesting to look at, if you take e-signature, that became really, really important during the pandemic. And now we're seeing some shift to things like digital notary and digital signing rooms. But how does the business create the document that needs to get e-signed? And so some investments there still, I think, are happening in the wealth space. So it's not always about self-service, but it's about enabling the financial advisors, relationship managers, removing friction so that they can deliver more value. And then I would say the other thing, just really quick, is we've seen barriers in terms of technology. Many companies are using legacy kind of on-prem systems, haven't been very flexible, haven't been very easy to connect. And so we've definitely seen a lot of accelerated investment in wealth firms in modernizing their technology, looking at how they can enable the business, reduce some of the demand on IT. So definite big space for us.
Let's do something slightly radical and just go to the multi-screen for a second, because I want to get a right-hand, left-hand vote on whether it's, you mentioned two things there, which is the legacy. If you think legacy systems are the biggest issue at the moment, please right hand. If you think it's mindset or the way you work, please left hand, either way you are or within the industry. So for legacy systems, is that the biggest issue that you guys face, or is it mindset? Left or right hand? Okay, hands up. Right hand for legacy from Chris, right hand from Cara, and right hand from John. Okay, it's a clean sweep. Interesting, very much. Thanks for doing that. Unrehearsed, but always worth hearing. And actually, if you wherever you are in the world have a particular view on what is holding your firm back, anonymously, just let us know, or you can do it and phrase it as the wider industry. That'd be wonderful. Cara, look, there's lots of competition out there, clearly. You have digital disruptors, you have tech firms, robo-advisors, you have challenger banks. How do you feel incumbents are keeping up with the challenges out there?
Yeah, well, I mean, a little bit back to the vote you just made us do. I actually wanted to put both hands up. Okay. I think a lot of incumbents, the issue has been, yes, they have a lot of legacy tech that's probably a little bit outdated and maybe doesn't serve the needs they have. But there's been a lot of investment, and the piece I think where there's a bigger issue is that there's been a lot of investment in individual capabilities, and there hasn't been a very good overarching view of how does all that technology fit together. I think that's what you find is a lot of firms have found themselves with a lot of great technology, but it doesn't actually all speak to each other very, very well, or they're using it for just specific client segments, and they haven't tied that all together. So there's been a lot going on in the industry, lots of acquisition, lots of partnership, lots of investment, lots of M&A. If you're in M&A, obviously fintech and wealth tech has been a very hot area to be in. So loads happening. I think what's lacking, and I wish I was a digital consultant, but what's really lacking is digital consultants to come in and help people make sense of everything they've got. How does it all fit together? And potentially they probably have even redundant systems, and they may be brand new, amazing systems, but they're probably pretty redundant. So anyway, that would be my view is.
Yeah, absolutely. What's really interesting there, and it's really important, is it's quite an old school way of thinking. It's an old school question to ask you, hey, all the challenges out there, how do we defend our borders? Well, actually, partnership is absolutely fundamental to moving forward. If you have those new ideas, the new diverse ideas coming through and the new technologies, that's the way to go, isn't it? Karen, I saw you nodding during Cara's point there. The interoperability, also making the old technology work and move you forward. Constant problem, it must be.
It absolutely is. And I think that is what is so great, though, about a lot of the more recent innovations. I mean, most technology now, where it's headed, is cloud-based, really built with APIs that allow companies to plug in different technologies and also access the data so that they can personalize more of the experience and really unlock some of the power of the data that they have in their core systems. But I really like what Cara was saying about, it's really important to think about the end-to-end customer journey. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris, let's talk about client expectations for a moment and how they've changed, particularly in terms of things like customer experience. But, what are you seeing? What are clients demanding more of, or perhaps demanding less of?
Yeah, I think the point around legacy systems is interesting, because actually what's happening is the pace of expectation change is really fast. You've had these macroeconomic forces, bearing down upon us for all sorts of reasons, the pandemic and all sorts of other factors that have kind of gone on, that are really rapidly changing expectations. One of the things that's been driven by the consumer experience in other industries, nothing to do with wealth and banking, is the expectation of immediacy. People want immediate, frictionless transactions wherever they are, and frictionless means different things in different situations. We all got quite good at working remotely with our customers, but now some people want to come face to face. You can't go back to the old way of working face to face. You have to bring the technology into those face to face sessions, and you don't want to be necessarily signing a piece of paper. Maybe you still want to e-sign it. Maybe you want to have flick it off from an iPad to someone's phone so they can look at it in their own time and save it on their device. And this sort of omni-channel experience that people are expecting you to have now, and they're expecting it to be there today. And so whilst you may not feel like you've got legacy systems, you need to get faster and faster and faster at the ability to adjust to those changing expectations.
John, we'll talk about the great wealth transfer in principle in a second, but I'm also interested, John, from your point of view, what are you seeing? What would you like to see, either technology or a way of working, perhaps the way that clients deal with you, that you would like to see improve, post-COVID, that we can actually start to modernize and start to work much more efficiently, much more effectively, and we'll go on to relationship shortly, but to make this relationship, this way of working better. Anything you would like to see?
Yeah, I think it's really to improve the kind of efficiency, if you like, of relationship managers within these wealth firms. Far too much time is spent on kind of non-client facing manual tasks. So it's really freeing up relationship managers to really do what they're good at, what they should be doing, acting as really the financial life coach to the client. So that's really the kind of progress we need to see, I think, over the next few years.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk about the great wealth transfer. I've flagged it up already in terms of the changing demographic of clients. How well do you think firms are prepared for this transfer to new types of clients?
Very mixed, I would say. I think, whilst this presents a great opportunity for firms, it also really presents a significant threat to those who don't adapt their business model. I mean, evidence suggests that maybe not enough advisors are having these family conversations, which are required to actually kind of facilitate and manage this transfer down to the next generation. as we know, too many firms have an aging client bank and face a diminishing value of their business. Acquirers are kind of financial planning, IFAs, wealth businesses, increasingly looking at the age profile of the client bank within these firms. So it's a real threat to firms who don't adapt. So the earlier that firms can start having these kind of family, multi-generational discussions, the better. A good starting point, in my mind, is to have a detailed proposition around the kind of decumulation of clients' wealth for clients in kind of later life. So really a detailed plan in terms of how to manage expenditure right through until mortality, using tools like cash flow analysis, which will really include a conversation regarding lifetime gifting, if relevant, and around legacy. So this naturally involves other members of the family. So it could be as recipients of lifetime gifts. It could be around some of the more procedural aspects regarding wills, lasting powers of attorney. So maybe adult children being added as executors, as attorneys. So this can really happen without necessarily having a conversation regarding the level of wealth, which can be at outset a difficult conversation to have. It's really that sort of gradual process. And I think this combined with maybe the education program for younger clients as well, I've found is actually very beneficial. This can be on a one-to-one basis with clients, with younger clients of important key individuals on a more formal program basis.
Do you find yourself being the custodian of that conversation more than you ever were before? Have things changed in that way? Because clearly what we're learning already from our session this morning is the way to facilitate that relationship more effectively with the use of technology is actually a focus that perhaps even surprised some firms, that actually that is possible. Whereas transactions and functionality was the previous focus, now it's about that relationship. Are you kind of feeling in charge of that?
Yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, firms have really kind of embraced or invested in financial planning, wealth planning a lot more in recent years. So they've actually now understood that a lot of the kind of offerings may be perceived to be commodities. So where they can add true value is around the planning, the lifetime transfers. So it's really where firms have made a big investment. So yes, we are the custodians of those conversations, bringing the family together, facilitating maybe uncomfortable conversations that individuals would not like to have ordinarily. And just as a gradual process, really encouraging that mindset amongst our clients.
Thanks, John. I'm sorry to keep with you for so long, but that was really interesting stuff. And perhaps wherever you are in the world, that rings true with you as well. But do let us know what you think. You can get in touch on the screen right here while we're live, and we'd love to hear from you and hear your accounts and any questions that you do have. Chris, look, one of the other features, very prominent feature that I spoke about at the start of our session today, was how 2/3 of wealth will be held by women by 2030. So how do you think firms are adapting to that particular change in demographics?
I think some of it's related to what we were just talking about. It's about dealing with customers in the relationship, and it's not just a single individual, it's a relationship, it's a family. You know, we've got customers that have been banking with us since the 17th century, and their family's gone all the way through, and there have been times when it's been a female principal, times when it's been a male principal, and then actually you shouldn't really even necessarily think about them like that. So I think the demographic change is actually probably the wrong way to think about it. I think people are thinking about male to female, they're thinking about millennials and this change. But I think the much more pressing change in demographics is what I term the connected generation. And that's coming much, much faster. So what you're seeing now is, regardless of age, there's a cohort of people, which includes some older customers as well as younger customers, who the first thing they do in the morning is they check their phone before they do anything else. They're online all of the time. They have expectation everything's delivered via mobile, and this connected generation is sort of age defying, and it's here now, and it's rapidly accelerating their expectations. So I think people that are waiting for women to inherit wealth or become more entrepreneurs, or the millennials to become the wealthy generation, are sort of missing the point of the massive transformation that's happening today, that we have to adapt to in how we deliver service in that kind of hybrid omni-channel type experience I talked about.
Cara, I'll come to for your thoughts in a second. But Karen, did I hear your voice there agreeing with Chris?
I think it's really interesting. I really appreciate, Chris, what you're saying. I mean, there definitely is data out there that shows there are generational differences in how people engage. There's one stat that I just think is funny. There was a stat that came out in The Economist in January that said, related to TikTok, 41% of 18 to 24-year-olds have sought financial advice using this hashtag money talk on TikTok. And I'm not somebody who uses TikTok, but just this idea that we have to communicate with them. And I really resonated with what you said about this connected generation. It might not be age related, but there's a really, I think it's important for wealth management companies to think about how are they building that trust and what kind of communication channels are they using. So as John was saying, you have to think about how are you educating this next generation. They may or may not want to use the same financial advisor as their parents. And so you have to solidify that trust, and using different channels of communication is going to be a really key part of that. There are some banks that are specifically creating content now for trying to attract that customer off of TikTok. So it's a wild west out there when it comes to digital channels.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, kind of, interesting and fascinating and in some ways exciting, but also that continuity has always been there, but the clarity, information, education seems to be so important. And that surprised me. It's surprised me in some ways about our conversation so far today. Cara, what do you think? What are the key areas that you feel that we should be focusing on to keep people's money safe, to keep their wealth safe?
Yeah, well, I mean, both, I think John and Chris and Karen actually just all made great points. And I think one thing that we're all quite focused on this hybrid model and recognizing the importance of the sort of the human touch. The biggest issue I think the industry has, though, is it's a very rapidly aging workforce. If you look at the average age of advisors, I mean, it's really moving up, and it's in the United States, average age of advisors is about 58 years old. So if we're trying to be part of this sort of new connected generation, again, I don't think it's necessarily an age thing, but we need to make sure that we've got people to service, right? So we're not attracting people into this industry anymore. And I think we need to kind of holistically look at ourselves and kind of go, why is it no longer that interesting? And anyone who is interested seems to be going down the digital route, and they want to just create create the tech. So to me there seems to be a gap that we haven't looked at, and we haven't tried to crack that nut. Because if we want to work with diverse client base, I think we do need to reflect our customers, right? And the vast majority of advisors out there do not reflect the broader customer base that exists. And the only other way we can do that is obviously through attraction and potentially retention of the right types of advisors and bankers. And to me, that's a big area that we need to focus on.
Absolutely. Well, that was really interesting. We've talked obviously now about the current state of the industry and how firms are raising the bar to meet the growing and changing expectations of these new digitally driven clients. Let's now look a bit deeper at how we can deliver value through digital. Now, a recent CFA survey of clients working with professional advisors and wealth managers found that the majority valued access to technology. In fact, they reported that it's even more important than access to a human. So that does represent what we've been talking about so far. But that was for the first time since the CFA survey began. So how does that affect firms who traditionally did build a model around personal relationship management? Let's keep on digging into it. First of all, Karen, which pain points do you think technologies can transform the best? Is it mainly on onboarding, or is it throughout the client journey? Where can tech really make a difference?
Right. I mean, onboarding certainly is a key area. And I think it's clear why, in the sense that onboarding is a really big, important moment of truth in the beginning of a relationship, or even for current clients where you're trying to onboard them to new investments. It often requires a lot of paperwork, from assessing risk to identity verification to funding an account. Still requires a paper or fillable PDF form that gets error-ridden, slow turnaround time. We talk a lot about, I've heard people call it the swivel chair effect, where I've got information over here and now I need to key it in over here. Or even thinking about the production of like a personalized investment proposal. Many customers that we work with are often replacing Microsoft Word or systems like that. Instead of being able to automatically, what we're trying to do is enable them to automatically produce compliant content in their proposals. But onboarding is not the only place where we need to see that digital transformation. And we're also seeing a lot more investment recently on the client servicing side. I think Cara mentioned that, thinking about client reporting as an example. Historically, relationship managers, back offices can take weeks to create bespoke reporting for their high net worth clients, hundreds of pages. But even these customers today want to be able to access the information in their investments on demand, on their mobile device, from anywhere they are, and they want to be able to personalize that experience. And so this idea, I know we were going to chat a little bit about hyper-personalization is very on trend right now. So from the way we personalize our shoes to personalize our investment reporting, clients have higher expectations today. So we're seeing more use of digital technology to allow clients and their advisors more of an opportunity to create not only bespoke reports faster, but to bring online digital interactivity to this reporting conversation. So that gives the relationship manager an opportunity to gain efficiency and have more strategic, high-value conversations. So those are a couple areas.
Yeah, well, Cara, personalization, hyper-personalization, really important. We will talk about that more. We can talk about it now if you want to, but any other areas you think can be helped very quickly or perhaps over the long term by the use of technologies? Is there anything that really bothers you right now that can be freed up by the better use of tech?
So rather than the bother, I think one thing that I find incredibly exciting is the democratization of alternatives. So ultimately we're talking about this wealth transfer, but there's also there's a very rapid growing middle class in a lot of markets around the world who normally would have had zero access to alternative investments. So I think fintech has really stepped up in that area. So when you talk about the client onboarding paperwork, I mean, which used to be horrific, and there just was no point in even taking on a client, for less than $5 million. And these fintechs have made it, possible for £100,000 investment, $100,000 investment to go into strategies that normally were really reserved for the most elite investors. So to me, that's really one of the most exciting areas. There's a lot more to be done in that space, and we need, I think, technology can really help on things like transparency. We still have a lot of issues on transparency and transparency of investments, for people to get better sense of what they're doing. I think I keep talking about joining things together, but I think one of the big issues also is that if you look at sort of Gen Z investment trends, a lot of them are making sort of these crowdsourcing small investments all over the place, and there isn't a lot of consolidation and the ability to have an oversight of all those investments and allowing maybe an advisor to kind of help and have a look at diversification and guide them in the investments they're making, rather than hearing of a good idea that they got over at a dinner party.
Yeah, I'll get your thoughts, Chris, on this maybe as well. But automation, John, would be the antithesis of what you used to do, right? Automation. I mean, that's not the personal touch and automation just don't mix, do they? But can they mix? How can automation help to build a better relationship? And perhaps that is with clients who have less lower net wealth.
Yeah, as you say, it does maybe sound counterintuitive in kind of the high net worth wealth space, but I think what we need to find is this kind of optimum hybrid business model between self-service and kind of personal advice. There are many challenges facing the wealth industry at the moment: operational, regulatory hurdles, shrinking margins. So clearly being more efficient is absolutely key. Increasing the productivity of relationship managers to provide a better service, reducing operational costs, and really kind of working out the functions that relationship managers are currently performing, which don't need that human interaction, and freeing up their time to actually focus on being, as I mentioned before, that kind of financial life coach. So I think the panacea is finding this kind of ideal balance between the two. And really evidence suggests that clients want this self-service functionality, but for most it isn't being delivered by the wealth industry at the moment. I mean, simple things like changing your address, updating your kind of marketing preferences, etc. People don't want to kind of call up or fill out a form. They want that done immediately there and then to increase the kind of the purpose of that client engagement. I think also what we want to see is really personalized client portals going forward. So clients and the families can kind of go into the portal, have a look at their personal goals and objectives, progress made to date, look at educational material based on their own preferences. So this is certainly the way forward, but I think we've got some way to go yet in the wealth industry.
Yeah, it's sometimes easy, isn't it, to forget that when we look at things like hyper-automation and other new initiatives and technologies, that actually the great purpose, the original purpose of things like automation was to enable people to do what they do best. And that has probably never been more true. When we talk about AI, we tend to talk about that now as well. But Chris, what do you think in terms of this hybrid advisory approach, but also the use of automation, for example, to allow the advisors to work in the way they always have done, which is a close personal relationship?
Yeah, there's plenty of bits of any client journey that are annoying for the banker and the customer, and those are the bits that need to be automated. And there's bits that are special for the customer. I don't think you should be joining a really high-end private bank online, instant account opening, just a sort of seamless experience. I think there's an element of it that should be a tactile experience. You should meet your banker. You should spend some time with them. You should get a feel for the brand. And I think sometimes the best way to look at this is to not look within your own industry. I think you need to look outside of your industry and say, well, who's doing this well and what are they doing well? I think if you look at luxury goods more broadly, then you look at the sort of things that our customers are engaging with, and you can take lessons from them. So if you look at the luxury car market, if you buy a luxury car, again, you don't order it online and have it delivered to your house. You want to go down and you want to drink the nice coffee in the showroom and be surrounded by all the nice cars. At the same time, you want to look at the configurator on an iPad. You want to go through and see what the car's going to look like in different colors and choose all of your features. So there's bits that need to be tactile and you need to be able to experience them, and you're happy for them to be slow. And there's bits that are just annoying. No one wants to fill out loads of forms and write their name 100 times and sign every page, to initial every page, all that kind of stuff. It's annoying. So it's about how do you go fast and slow? Which bits should be fast and which bits should be slow and tactile and special. And that's what we need to work out, what makes sense for our customer journeys and the specific things we're trying to do.
How much would your clients be happy to answer those questions? I mean, possibly not 5 times, just the once, but that is, I guess, where the answers to those questions come from.
Yeah, I think customers are really happy to engage on stuff where they see the value. They don't want to answer, what's your address 5 times and fill that in on 5 different, different forms. But they're happy, when they're coming to their banker, who they trust, to talk about their financial situation and to have a rich conversation about it, and for you to seamlessly capture that information without making them go through some long-winded process. Now, they wouldn't be happy to talk to another type of organization about that. But I think where customers see that the information is relevant to the thing that they're trying to do, they're very happy to have the conversation, share their data and all that kind of stuff. Where people aren't willing to do that is when they don't think it's relevant, or they feel like they've already given that information in some other fashion.
Absolutely. Let's talk about regulation and the pressures of costs, which are clearly there at the moment and more than ever. Karen, how can new technologies help with regulatory pressures, also with cost pressures? Where are the key things that you think that you advise clients to focus on to improve their lot around those 2 issues?
Right. I love the fast and slow comment, Chris. But I would absolutely say compliance is often a key driver for companies to invest in their communications technologies. So if you take FINRA standards as a key example, we've seen many of our clients, not our clients, we've seen many companies out there in the news incur pretty steep fines when advisors or relationship managers are not recommending investments that match their clients' risk tolerance. In other words, they're not meeting FINRA suitability standards. So what if you could bring in business rules to be able to streamline the process of capturing that risk information and then use that information dynamically to generate fully compliant proposals, onboarding documentation, things like that, that takes the risk away from using something like a Microsoft Word or something like that. So that's an example. And then even further, what if you could leverage audit tracking behind the scenes so that as a business, you always know what content that relationship manager is sending out, and you always know in your templates kind of who changed what compliance language when they did it, that type of thing, who approved a document. All of that can be tracked and provided for reporting purposes. And so it's a good example, I think, of where a digital technologies behind the scenes can help companies with compliance, which ultimately, of course, from a cost perspective, reduces that risk of fines and that type of thing.
It's also a confidence builder, isn't it, with relationship managers, to know that there's a really up-to-date set of resources that they can use and they can just tweak those for that client. Wonderful. Chris, in broader terms, the amount of data that is held on clients, and this is true of all businesses, retail to financial services, there's a lot of data out there, good data, cleansed data, up-to-date data that can be used. How much better could we be using that data for risk? And what should we, we can spend another hour on this. So in brief terms, how can we start to, what can we focus on?
Yeah, I think people have scratched the surface with data. Everyone's been capturing it for a while now, and people have started to govern it and manage it better. But I think you've got to tackle it on two fronts. I think you've got to look at what are the problems you're trying to solve, either for the regulator, for your business, for efficiency, or for your customers, and say, well, what are the very specific questions I want to answer? And then have I got the data that answer those questions? But the second front, which is perhaps, where the real opportunity might lie, is you need to invest in exploratory work in data and understand, well, what secrets are hidden in this data that I might not understand? I think you'll probably not find an industry now that doesn't have a good data science set of consultancies, related to it, or a company that has its own data science team. And I think you need to hire really great data scientists who can not just answer the questions that you have, but work out what are the questions that you haven't asked, and what things could the data unlock for you if you just looked at it from different angles. And so, yeah, I think there's a myriad of things you could solve, but I think you've got to tackle it on those two fronts to work out what they are.
And just really in a few seconds, I don't think this is possible, Chris, but, for the non-data scientists out there, as we talked about already, the average age of the wealth manager is 58. So, to look at the questions that you don't know the answers to already, it would be good if we could all understand, just briefly how you approach that. Is there a broad way of looking at that? Is it the outsider's perspective, for example, or is it the pure data scientist perspective? How can we all start to talk about this? I
think innovation comes where you bring different skills together. It comes on the boundaries. So you need to bring data scientists who understand data and patterns and maths and the sort of the way that these algorithms work to look across large data sets and find insights. At the same time, you need to bring them together with customers, with relationship managers who don't know what's possible or not within the data, but are able to ask the innocent question and actually maybe link those two things together and find, hang on a minute, there's something here, and we need to investigate this a little bit further.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that. It was very short and sweet, and I thank you for that. Cara, I think you talked about trust earlier on. Transparency is also very important. How can we start to use data to build trust and to visibly build trust? Because it's all very well being trustworthy, but your clients need to know that you are the most trustworthy.
Yeah. Well, I think I like Chris's point. It's you ultimately you have to be able to ask the right questions, right? So first of all, if you're collecting data and things, you need to understand what you're looking for within that, so that when you are working with clients and you're going to try to transmit certain messaging about your own transparency, you have to have a good sense of that. I think there's no question that digital has completely shifted the ability for people to get a better understanding of potentially the firm they're working with, or the ultimately even the individual that they want to work with. And this is a very personal industry, and if we're saying it's hybrid, if it's completely digital, people still actually expect the corporate that they engage with now to meet a lot of new ESG factors, right? Like that's become a whole new issue, is that you can't just provide the best technology and cheap investment options, and it could just be quite flash. Ultimately, people want to also know, what do you stand for, and how are you engaging with your own communities and things like that. But when it comes to the individual, and if you're choosing your direct private banker that you want to work with, having access to the amount of information that's out there, and then being able to potentially curate articulate that in order to deliver it to your client in a really open and honest way is going to be really important. People do ultimately choose the person who they're going to work with in this space.
Absolutely, really, really good points. And Karen, before we move on to the next section, we talked about hyper-automation, or hyper-personalization is really where we're going to. How important is it for this industry to go hyper-personalized? John mentioned an example of perhaps having a specific client portal for every client. So there'd be a specificity which would mean that I get the service and the information and the mode of interaction that I really want. How important is it that we all think like that?
Yeah, and I think I think the example actually Chris gave of a car, buying a high-end car and being able to personalize that is a great example. There's a stat that I have from EY from last year that says about half of wealth management investors would pay more for increasingly personalized and specialized products and services. And that number actually goes up to 80% among millennial clients. So it's really more about being able to grow not only current business, but future business. And just people having this expectation around everything today, around I call it the Netflix effect, or Amazon, where it's like making recommendations based on what we know about, what you know about us. And this sense people are willing now to kind of trade their personal data in exchange for more of a personalized service, I think is definitely a trend that we'll continue to see.
And in fact, if we look at it two ways, personalization is, yes, the specifics of the experience that I have, which is often what we think about, but also it is about minimizing the wasted time. We talked about this. Clients don't want to waste their time on underlining this and checking that figure. It's important for efficiency for them, as well as a more positive experience, isn't it, Karen?
Precisely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, before we move on, just a quick reminder that we really want to hear from you if we haven't already. Questions are coming through. You will be driving the last 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes of our conversation. So just send in your question as soon as you have one. We've had a few through. They are looking good. I'm just reading them now. Our panel haven't yet seen them, but we will take a good look at those in around about 7, 8, 9 minutes time. So simply send them in through the webpage. Next to us here on the video screen. Get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. You will drive that last part of our discussion. Okay, so we've looked at the current state of the market. We've looked at how digital transformation and that hybrid advisory approach is about to, if not already, revolutionizing personal and personalized relationships. Now let's look to the future and try to predict the other innovations that may well be on the horizon. Cara, first of all, how can we take personalization to this next level and start to diversify products and services into other industries, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea of ultra personalization when it comes to investments is a really interesting idea. So you've been investing in a certain, this is going to be highly regulated, I would imagine. But to be able to say, given where you have been and the things that you've been interested in, and it could even be, if they're accessing certain articles in your portal, that maybe it turns out you are actually you want to learn more about crypto potentially as an investment option, or you want to learn about certain types of hedge funds. I think there is a lot that can be done when it comes to the again, ultra personalization of investment options. It could be impact. Where do they want to potentially make an impact, and how do you steer the portfolio to make sure that they are making an impact in the areas that are important to individual clients? So I think that there's loads more to be done there. There really hasn't been very much. John earlier referred to, ideally you want the relationship managers to be focused on the relationships, right? We find still far too many that are really interested in the investment side of it. And that is not efficient. But if you had ways that actually the investment options that are potentially being put forward really do reflect what people are interested in and where they want to, like I said, potentially make an impact. That's a great time saver for the relationship manager and a true value add to a client.
Yeah. A quick question to John. I'd love your expertise on this as well. Your and your colleagues' job has been to offer these the personal, in some ways the personalization, yes, in relationships, but also in terms of the portfolios and the assets and how you're managing those. I guess what we're doing here is trying to personalize at scale, personalize in a very efficient way, so that we can focus on the stuff that's really important going forward. And I suppose that ultimately has to be understanding what your clients really care about, not only in terms of how their wealth is managed, but also in terms of where investments are made. I guess this has to be part of that conversation going forward.
It certainly is. I mean, we're spending a lot of time, and the industry is generally kind of improving the sort of soft skills of relationship managers. We've invested a lot at NetBank in terms of training all our front office staff and what we call kind of emotional wealth management, really equipping them to have those kind of deep, meaningful conversations, get under the skin of their clients, and really, which is the key, I would say, to building long-term sustainable and ultimately profitable client relationships, and something maybe bankers haven't been that good at historically, I would say.
Yeah, and I suppose it's the interface between that personal approach, but also then the use of technology where there still needs to be work done.
I think there's a lot of work to be done, to be honest with you, particularly around the kind of self-service we were talking about earlier. The expectations of clients clearly are not being met by the reality on the ground, I think, by the majority of wealth managers at the moment. So we need to see a lot of progress over that, I think, over the next few years. Otherwise, there's lots of challenges out there, quite clearly, who could come in and encroach in the space quite easily.
Absolutely. Karen, how much transformation, digital and otherwise, do you think the industry needs to make to integrate things like, you know, the wider metaverse into what's done? Because there are concepts out there that perhaps many of us haven't really dealt with yet.
Right. No, I kept thinking that, you know, imagine a world in the future, 10 years from now, where our events and this event that we're doing on Zoom is somehow held in the metaverse instead. And for many baby boomers and older generations, this virtual world seems limited to things like gaming. But when you think about it, it's so much more than that. There are actual populations, there's actual currency, cross-border payments, things like that all happening in the metaverse. JP Morgan investing more in this concept of metaverse. So I think there's more development to be had there, and really thinking if forward, the way we think about it too is if that's the trend and that's the future, what are the communications going to look like? How can we make sure that we're following regulatory processes like compliance with anti-money laundering, identity checks, things like that, being able to follow compliance in our communications, but doing that in that virtual space? I definitely think it's the wave of the future.
Yeah, and people, as you say, young people in particular are living entire lives, and have been for many years actually, but much more mainstream now, and the tokenization, the use of tokens and so on, this is all live. It's happening right now. In fact, people are really buying that way. So absolutely, and you can make gains, or of course you can make losses too, but it's important, Karen, isn't it, to shift that mindset just slightly, because even though we may not know about it, our customers of the future definitely do.
Absolutely. And different types of asset classes, NFTs, crypto for currency. I mean, there's a lot of disruption going on, to be sure.
Yeah. Chris, you know, one of the things that many of these issues, but also regulation, and we have to talk about this again, and costs they kind of hold us back, and perhaps it's more difficult to innovate, or more difficult to feel confident to innovate. But how can we keep doing that? How can we keep doing what we've talked about, understanding, widening our world, so that we understand the clients, while also having these cost and regulatory pressures in the background?
I think people think about regulation wrong. I think there's so much sort of narrative in the whole industry about, the regulation's always holding us back, and it's so difficult, and I'd love to be spending more time doing this other stuff. I think, you know, when you think about what does the regulator want from the industry, they want you to provide a great experience for customers. They want it to be safe and secure. And so you should look at it as an opportunity. So try and look behind the spirit of the regulation, of the why it's being written, and then work out, well, how do you deliver it in a way that harnesses the regulation to deliver innovation? Look at the open banking regulation. I think, you know, everybody started out going, I've got to write all these APIs. This is really annoying. It's going to take so much time. But look at the innovation that's starting to creep in now to improve customer experiences, to streamline customer journeys, to enable you as a onboarding to go and ingest other banks' data without having to ask for bank statements. I mean, these are small steps in some ways, but they're huge innovations in other ways. And I think you've got to look at all of that regulatory pressure as the regulator's not there trying to annoy you. They're trying to make you give better experiences to customers, and you should use that as an opportunity.
I think from your hallowed halls from 1672, I think that's the spirit of innovation right there in those hallowed halls. Really lovely. Final question really before we move on to audience questions. Where are the greatest opportunities, do you feel, and maybe I'll throw it to Cara first of all, for innovation and investment right now? Where are things exciting for you, where you can see potentially the business adapting, moving, succeeding as a result? What do you think, Cara?
I think it's I think ultimately starting to really think about I guess a bit to what Chris was referring to, looking at other industries and not being so confined by financial services, and starting to say, wow, look at what they're doing over there, and is there something that we could do over here? I mean, to Karen's point on the metaverse, right? Is there a way that we can even shift relationship management to something that happens in the metaverse, right? I feel like we typically think within our walls, maybe in our own hallowed halls of financial services and wealth management and what it's supposed to look like, and I think that confines us, and maybe throwing people into our own firms that come from completely different industries would actually really shake things up.
John, I saw you nodding there. Gently considered as always, but what do you think in terms of where we can move and move quickly to start to really shake things up quickly, fail fast, move on, test and learn, all those good things?
Yeah, I just kind of reiterate, I suppose, what Cara was saying there. I think we just sort of think outside the box a little bit more and think broader in terms of kind of experience of other sectors. But we need to kind of move quickly. I think the quickest win, hopefully, will be towards this much more of a sort of self-service capability. And in my mind, just freeing the relationship managers up to do the job they should be doing. That's really got to be the kind of the next step in getting this hybrid model working correctly.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, perhaps I'll throw that question, something like that, to Chris and to Karen at the end of our session, but we have a good 8 minutes or so to answer your questions right now. But a great discussion. I hope you agree. We're not done yet because it is now time to hear from you. Thanks for sending in your questions and comments through the webpage. We'll get to them in just a second's time. Before we do, please, if you can, just take a very brief moment to rate today's webinar so far. Please click the feedback button, which is just under your screen, under our screen. Your response is totally confidential, but really useful. So thanks very much. That can help us to improve the things we talk about and the way we talk about them. Okay, but let's go straight into your question. Right, so there are 2 likes. That's very publicly spirited of you. Thank you for liking some of these comments. Let's see who can answer this. We haven't seen these questions before. There's a lot of focus in the industry about automation of processes. Is there enough consideration given to investing in redesigning the customer journey and experience based on behavioral science and customer insights? Oh, that's a good one. Right, so behavioral science, sentiment, all those good things. Yeah, please, Chris, start us off.
It's exactly what I was going to answer, in the last question, actually. I think the real opportunity and the real focus is to move quickly into thinking about the customer experience. I think too often we think about, our own perspective as a bank or as a wealth management company, or we might be thinking about the technological level. What could this thing do for us? You can strip all of that away and say, what do customers want? How are they leading their lives? What do they want from this experience? And then how do we design our technology and our processes and our people around the experience the customer wants? And that's the opportunity, and that's the next wave of innovation.
Yeah.
In fact, Karen, I'll come. But Cara, you'd actually referred to this very early on, and please, if you're watching, if you can rewind to on demand, then do have a look at this. Cara did talk about the focus of investment, the focus of whether we're looking at, in that case, it was relationship, which has come through during COVID, or whether it's processes. So there's more information there earlier on in our session. Karen, sorry, yes, please do.
Oh, no, I just was teeing up what Chris was talking about, too, is the sense of enabling banks and private banks and wealth managers to get more analytics on. When you start to do more interactive reporting and digital, you can start to see what kind of things customers are interested in and start to design the journey around that. So that's one of the benefits of digital technology, is getting that greater insight so that you can then kind of, even at a macro level, go, oh, okay, we have a lot of people who are really interested in tech stocks, or maybe we need to come up with a different fund around this. So really being able to use those analytics to not just automate the journey, but also look at developing products and services that are more appealing to clients.
Yeah, and just in case you've been fishing around beneath us on our screen, I've just been informed that this time, today, it's a red button, and that is on the right of the screen. So look around there for feedback. We'd love to hear from you. Any other thoughts on that? It is John, it is so important, and I think we've established this. It doesn't hurt to remind our audience, if they joined us late, about the shift from the processes to the relationship. It's so important to look at the customer journey, the customer experience, but I guess it's the integration of tech that's the tricky bit.
Yeah, it's a matter of moving away, I think, from this kind of one-size-fits-all approach, which I think the wealth management industry has been kind of guilty of in previous years. So really personalizing, improving the experience for all our clients. And I think we've got a long way to go in that journey, but clients want to kind of an efficient, get the most out of their time, but also embrace really the qualities that the relationship manager has to offer in terms of delivering that true personal advice. Because I think it's true to say that I think even amongst millennials, the demand for advice is still there, and we can sometimes forget that.
Absolutely.
This question. Cara, please. If I can just add to that, I think the one area, if we think about the client journey, I think one thing that we really haven't done enough of in the industry is true client segmentation. So, and then using the artificial intelligence to kind of watch what are people doing, what are they using when we have technology, what are they using, and how are they enabled? Because I think we are saying millennials. There is a lot of diverse groups within the millennial group, right? So in the past, I think we have viewed the chunks of people. There's the widow who receives all the money and then she leaves her financial advisor, right? So we haven't gotten into the actual why, and I think segmentation is a really important aspect that is often overlooked.
There is a real danger in demographic generalization, isn't there? It's a really, really good point. And when you add a label, of course, you're not really dealing with the individual needs. And so really, really good point. Cara, back to you possibly for this one. It's a question from our audience, has a like or two here. What advice would you give to firms who are wanting to integrate ESG? I'm sure there's lots of advice. Can you start us off?
Yeah, so I think well, first and foremost is, ESG at its core is just good investment sense, right? So to me, every asset manager ought to be including ESG because those are just good factors to be considering when you're making investments. Do not invest in an ESG fund if you're trying to make an impact. You're not going to make any impact by investing in an ESG fund. You're just making a wise and well-informed investment when you go into an ESG fund. And oftentimes those have a lot of exclusions, and I'm not necessarily a fan of exclusions. What you really want to do, though, if you want to make an impact, if water is important to you or certain communities are important to you, then start to get the information on the investment options that you have to impact those specific areas that you care about. So I think as firms look to add product to their platform, absolutely ensure that ESG is being taken into consideration, but I don't believe that it needs to have an ESG as a label, because a lot of that is unfortunately greenwashing, and they are saying trying to say things that they're doing.
We have a little bit of breakup there, Cara, but we'll be back with you very shortly. Yeah, just a little bit of breakup there, but got it. Thank you very much. I've got time for one more question. The question is going to be, and I'm going to throw it to John first of all, if you don't mind, if you can handle this. Sorry there, Cara, we lost you there for a second, but you're back with us now. Thanks for that. How do you originate new clients, such as the new money, in inverted commas, from high growth tech SMEs, where their founders are the first ones in their family that achieve wealth through a successful exit, especially before they are in the news? Okay, let's leave that second bit separately. But new generation, of course, how do you start to bring those new clients in for them to understand for the first time what you're doing?
Yeah, I think it's making yourself relevant as a firm, isn't it, to these segments of clients. So I think it's having the right relationship managers who have this kind of skill set to actually kind of relate to the clients you're talking about, the right demographic, the right background. I think is absolutely key. So talking the same language, but also getting involved with those clients clearly at the right stage. So it's an investment of time well before the exit event, liquidity event of these clients, and building up that personal relationship, that rapport, and you become that trusted advisor at the point the kind of liquidity events actually occurs.
Yeah, it's the conversation before the conversation, essentially, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely. Okay, listen, it's almost time to go, but I want to throw, and I did promise I would, Karen, we're going to try and wrap up. Cara, you're back with us. Thanks very much for joining us again. We lost you there for a second, but look, it was about opportunities, and Chris answered his version of it. What areas or bits of tech do you think have the greatest opportunity right now to transform this industry? And we talked about the way we work with clients. We talked about the way that you can facilitate better conversations, but also there are things under the hood. What do you feel?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we've touched on a lot of them, to be sure. I think that client reporting is really interesting. Just teeing off what John was just saying about client acquisition. I mean, even that has changed, certainly with the pandemic. I was talking with an investment advisor company talking about they used to go to a lot of golf events, just as a, hypothetical example. And now they were trying to do a lot more things online, doing some more educational types of activities. So thinking even differently about that education process. And if I go back to my TikTok example, this, banks are out there creating content specifically for that channel. And, for a private bank, Chris, might not be appropriate right now for that type of client. But when you think long-term about the future high net worth client, and how are they educating themselves about what's happening and how do they manage their money? There's certainly an appeal with these mobile apps, the Betterment, the Robinhoods and things like that. And so anything that we do to remove friction from engaging, to also provide more value and more education, because a lot of those apps, I mean, they aren't really doing that, right? They make it easy, but there are people losing money because they don't really know what they're doing. So,
Absolutely.
More of that high value education certainly is beyond anything that technology can do, but it's providing it in a way that's consumable and on the channels that they're using.
Absolutely. Well, I'm afraid that is all that we have time for. I hope you've enjoyed the last hour, that you found the tips, the insights, the perspectives from our panel really useful. Thanks for sending in your questions. Sorry that we couldn't get to them all, but if you do have that minute before you leave us, please do fill in the poll on the red button to the right of us to give you wider feedback. We value your opinion clearly, but it's also confidential. You can steer the way that our future sessions go, so that we keep making these things really relevant and useful to you. But it's time to go. Thanks for joining us. For now, stay safe and see you soon. Take care.
Thank you.
The rain could